Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest Top 5 episode. This is the show where I get a topic in progressive rock from my wife. She comes up with all the topics and then I come up with a top 5 list just off the top of my head. It's not very researched or thought out. This is just me off the cuff, just coming up with something for fun, just a short video for the week, basically a jumping off point to hear your guys' thoughts and to get some good commentary. If you like this kind of content, I would appreciate a subscription. I always say this at the beginning of these videos because I really like building the channel and it helps when I have more subscribers. It helps me know that these episodes are being well received. And I just want people to know about it and to be alerted to these videos as they come out. You know, every single Tuesday I'm doing these top 5s and they've been going really well. So I'm grateful to have anyone on board who likes this content. Please like and comment on the video as well. I'd appreciate all of that support. Helps me to keep this channel going and to feel motivated to keep running the channel and doing it the way I've been doing. So thank you guys for your support, and now let's jump into today's topic. A couple months ago, one of my first videos I did for this series was non-prog albums by prog artists. That was a difficult topic for me that I ended up struggling with quite a bit, but today we're kind of doing the reverse of that in a sense. We're doing prog songs by non-prog artists. So basically these are songs that I would classify as prog, or at least prog-y, that they have prog elements to them, but they're not done by traditional prog bands. You know, they're not done by the bands that would be typically classified as progressive rock bands. And I know when I do videos like this, it often gets little minor criticisms because whenever you're talking about genres and labeling, a lot of people start to get nitpicky about like, well, technically maybe that is a prog band, you know, or maybe would you really call that a prog song? You know, it's like, how do you label things? How do you know what's considered a prog song? How do you know what's considered a prog band? And so take these with a little bit of a grain of salt. I know many of you might not totally be on board with all of these choices, but these are the ones that just popped into my brain as bands that aren't traditionally considered prog bands, but these are tracks that seem to have a heavy prog inspiration and showcase that other bands and other artists are influenced by prog as well in their music. So at number 5, I'm picking Toto and their track Hydra from the album Hydra. This was the follow-up to their debut album. Their debut was focused more on kind of the pop, funk, classic rock side of the group, but in this opening track from this album, they really make for an expanded piece here. It's a dramatic title track, building from atmospheric orchestration in the intro to deliver some offbeat verses and a stunning chorus. There's some great guitar riffs from Steve Lukather, some Steve Porcaro synths, and an instrumental section which really showcases the drumming prowess. Add in David Pake's vocals onto this and some big harmonies, and you've got a great epic song that really takes some cues from prog music. I had to include Toto on this list because Toto is a band I've really enjoyed and loved. Wouldn't be classified technically as prog music, but I think they dabble in it from time to time. They have some more virtuoso musicianship at times. They have these more expanded pieces. They have an album I truly love that I almost picked a song from, but I wanted to pick something that was probably a bit more well-known. But Falling in Between, I believe is the name of the album. To me, it's like a prog album that came out in the 2000s when I was in college, and I just picked up that record and loved it, loved all the pieces on it, and really I slotted it within a lot of the prog that I had at the time, so I considered them to be quite proggy, and I think this shows an early inclination towards some of those prog tendencies on Hydra. Number 4, I'm picking Elton John and Funeral for a Friend / Love Lies Bleeding, the track that opens up Yellow Brick Road. This really strikes me as very progressive, and it surprised me when I first heard this track, especially the Funeral for a Friend part that's like this really expanded progressive instrumental section that goes through so many movements and feels and is just such a really crazy instrumental that you wouldn't expect to hear from a mainstream artist, at least not today anymore. But back then, you know, prog was a bit more accepted, and even an artist like Elton John had influences from it. So I find that fascinating. There's some great synthesizer on this track. I believe I've read that Funeral for a Friend was basically Elton John thinking of music that would go with this topic, and it just created this expanded section and this great instrumental that leads into Love Lies Bleeding, which on its own, Love Lies Bleeding maybe isn't super progressive. It's more of a standard kind of rock classic. But when paired with Funeral for a Friend, it really makes for a great suite, a great complement for these two tracks that has this proggy influence in the musicianship. So really thought that is a cool piece to express this. Number 3 is Radiohead's Paranoid Android from OK Computer. I'm still trying to get into Radiohead. It's a band that I know a lot of my contemporaries really enjoy and really like, but I would consider them more alternative rock, art rock, perhaps indie rock. Not really thinking of them totally as prog, but they definitely have proggy influences, and I think Paranoid Android is a great showcase for that, because this has multiple movements in it, a lot of cool instrumental things going on, a lot of cool things happening rhythmically as well, and it just has this eerie, almost interesting vibe that is off kilter and different, especially compared to the popular music landscape at the time, really creating something very unique and special. And I think that showcases a bit of that progressive spirit. It's like six minutes long or so, but it has so many different sections and things going through it, 4 distinct sections in fact, and because it has so much variety, I consider it very proggy. It has a lot of different things going on, some instrumental stuff, some reprising of older themes coming into the mix later, some really interesting things that I think really showcase Radiohead's progressive tendencies, even though they wouldn't be classified technically as a progressive rock band. And number 2, I'm going to pick Led Zeppelin's Achilles' Last Stand. Led Zeppelin's another band where you could probably point to several pieces of theirs, and there was a lot of contenders for this, that showcase a bit of that progressive rock spirit and influence. They can be a bit experimental at times, and I think a lot of people who love the classic prog bands also love Led Zeppelin. You know, there's a lot of shared love for these types of bands, and I think for good reason, because they have great pieces that really have this progressive rock influence, like Achilles' Last Stand, which is like a really cool, almost, I believe it's about 10 minutes long, and has, once again, a lot of great sections and different cool musicianship. They're showing off their playing, they're showing different sections, they're showing these interesting different time signatures, switching to like a section in 5/4, whereas a lot of the song is in 4/4, but we're getting different sections, introducing some good soloing, and interesting interplay between the musicians that I think really showcases a really cool progressive rock influence into their playing, you know. And they also explore lots of grand epic themes in their songs, you know, paint these big epic pictures of these almost fantasy inspired situations. So I think there's a lot of shared DNA here with Led Zeppelin, even though they wouldn't be classified as a prog band. They're more of a classic rock or hard rock band, but they definitely were inspired by the genre and definitely have some of those tendencies to experiment, to add different instruments, to have some perhaps mellotron or different things inspired into their music. And I think this piece, Achilles' Last Stand, showcases a bit of that nature. And I'm sure there's other pieces that can be pointed to. But number 1, maybe it's a little bit too obvious, too on the nose, perhaps, but I picked Queen and their track Bohemian Rhapsody. And the reason I picked this, and this might be the band that people argue, like, well, back in the 70s, they kind of were a prog band in a lot of regards, with those early albums, especially. Queen 2 has so much progressive rock spirit on it and so much great expanded epic pieces of music there. But to me, I don't really think the general public would think of Queen as a prog band. They think of them as a classic rock band from the 70s and 80s, and wouldn't really realize that they had such ties with progressive rock throughout a lot of their pieces. And what's fascinating to me about Bohemian Rhapsody is it's a mega hit. It's one of the most popular rock songs in history, but when you listen to it, it definitely has a lot of progressive rock influence to it. It has these multiple different sections. It has some really interesting instrumental stuff going on. The whole vocal interplay is something that a lot of prog bands really were influenced by and really did in their prime. You know, there's just so much baked into this piece that just makes it feel so akin to progressive rock that it's almost shocking that it was such a big hit as it became. It's really cool. It shows their influences from different genres, that they were influenced even by opera and by classical music, and that they really brought this all together but put it in a rock format. And I think that's really one of the characteristics you could point to of what prog's all about, is taking these disparate influences, taking these influences from classical music, from jazz music, from all these different genres, but putting them together in an interesting and unique way into this suite. But the backbone is rock instrumentation to create these sort of sounds and different styles. So I think this really showcases progressive rock at its best in a way that became mega popular. And that's really interesting to me. So I had to put that at number 1. So hopefully you appreciated these choices. I know you could probably quibble with some of them of like, well, is that really a non-prog artist? And, maybe some of these should be considered prog bands, or at least prog adjacent. Maybe some of these songs you don't find to be very proggy in certain regards and respects. So I would definitely be interested to hear your guys' opinions and how you feel about these pieces of music, and for your choices for prog songs done by non-prog artists. I'm sure there's a wealth of choices. I kind of love this type of stuff. This was a chance for me to talk about some of my favorite artists here that I don't typically get to, besides like the classic albums series that me and Janet talk about. I really love tracks like this that aren't done by traditional prog bands, but definitely have that proggy influence, and I'm fascinated by it. So I'd love to hear much more suggestions in this type of lane and this topic. So thank you guys so much for all you do for the channel. Thank you guys for participating on these videos, and I hope you guys will continue to watch them and will join me in a future top 5. So thank you guys, and just keep enjoying the music. Bye everybody.